We often live under the assumption that the answers we need are somewhere else, held by a person with more authority, or hidden behind a sign we haven't seen yet. We exhaust ourselves looking for an external guide to tell us what comes next. A young monk named Paulo spent years in this pursuit. He traveled through 3 different villages, convinced that the clarity he lacked was waiting for him in the mind of a master. He spent a season with his first teacher, who told him to simply be still. Paulo tried to force his body into quiet, but his mind wouldn't follow. He eventually left, certain the problem was the instruction. He found a second teacher, who told him to find himself through service. Paulo spent his days working for others, but the internal emptiness he felt didn't go away. He moved on again. A third teacher told him to sit with his pain. Paulo sat, but the pain remained unchanged, a heavy weight that refused to shift. He had changed his location and his mentors, but he carried the same frustrated perspective across every border he crossed. By the time Paulo reached the gates of the main monastery, he was physically and emotionally depleted. He had spent his energy and had nothing to show for it. He stood before the head monk and admitted his failure. He had searched 3 villages, followed 3 teachers, and found only a deepening sense of nothingness. The head monk didn't offer a lecture or a secret scroll. He simply assigned Paulo a room and said nothing else. After years of searching for a voice that would provide the answer, Paulo was met with a silence he didn't know how to fill. Paulo tried to manufacture peace through sheer effort. He became the most diligent monk in the monastery, meditating for hours, memorizing every text, and working the garden until his hands were raw. He watched the other monks around him. They seemed settled, moving with a natural ease that Paulo couldn't replicate, no matter how hard he worked. When he asked them for their secret, their answers felt like riddles. One said the peace was already there, another said the secret was to stop looking. One evening, sitting on the cold stone steps, Paulo reached his breaking point. He decided that the quiet he was looking for didn't actually exist. He had treated the monastery like a machine, believing that if he just pushed the right buttons and followed the right rules, the result would be guaranteed. The next morning, the old master approached him and gestured for Paulo to follow him to the back of the grounds. They stopped at a heavy wooden door. It was secured by a weathered iron lock that looked like it hadn't been moved in years. The master told Paulo to open it. Paulo looked at the heavy mechanism and told the master he couldn't. He didn't have a key. Paulo immediately began to search the ground. He kicked at the dirt, looked under rocks, and felt along the wall for a hidden ledge. He ran to the storage room and checked the shelves. He searched the kitchen. He even stopped 2 other monks, asking if they had seen where the key was kept. He returned to the master and admitted that the key was nowhere to be found. His first instinct was to scour every inch of his physical environment, never pausing to consider any other possibility. The master didn't point to a hidden drawer. He simply told Paulo to check his own robe. Paulo reached into the fold of the cloth near his chest. His fingers touched something cold. He pulled out a small, dark iron key. He remembered then that the head monk had given it to him the day he arrived. He had tucked it away and never looked at it again, too preoccupied with his own struggle. He placed the key in the lock. It turned with a heavy click. He pushed the door open to reveal a small room, empty but for the sunlight streaming through a single window. He had spent years trying to acquire what was already resting in the pocket of his robe. The master noted that Paulo had searched the storage room, the kitchen, and the grounds, every single place except for the 1 inches away from his own heart. He had crossed 3 rivers and climbed 3 hills to find a teacher, while the very object he needed moved with every step he took. We often assume that because a problem feels difficult, the solution must be far away. We look for it in other people or in places we haven't been yet. The quiet Paulo was after wasn't waiting at the end of a long road. It was simply the one place he hadn't thought to look. Every teacher had said the same thing in different ways. Be still, serve, sit with what is. Paulo had heard the words, but he kept looking past them, searching for something more complex. Paolo sat in the room for a long time, the key still in his hand. If the answer isn't in a new village or a new teacher, where have you been avoiding looking? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that help you look within, and share this with someone who is still searching.